Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Before we get started, I want to let you all know that we have both an ASL interpreter in the room. We also have a Spanish interpreter. So if there are some of you here who are speaking Spanish, we'll invite you to come up here to this first section of the room so that you can access the content for this evening. I'll invite our Spanish translator to translate that for us, and then we'll kind of get started.
Muy buenas tardes. Para su conveniencia tenemos a un intérprete de español en la tarde de hoy. Así que si ustedes necesitan la ayuda del intérprete de español, por favor pasen al frente para usar al intérprete. También tenemos a un intérprete del lenguaje de señas disponible en caso de que lo sea necesario. Gracias.
Thank you so much. At this time, I will invite Russell Wilkinson to the microphone.
Want to be in compliance here, you know, since we are taking our mask wearing seriously here at the National Civil Rights Museum. Good evening, everyone. I'm Russ Wigginton, and I have the distinct honor of serving as the president of the National Civil Rights Museum. And we couldn't be happier and more excited to host this important conversation. Prior to being at the museum, I've worked in education for the last 25 years. And when you think about the role that education plays in all of our lives, whatever your background, whatever your situation, education is critical. And the fact that the State Department of Education is focusing on and inviting the community to engage in conversation around public school funding is a tribute to the seriousness that our state is taking education for all of our students. I think it's really important that you all are here, because if you've never toured this museum, there are many parts of it that I think are special. But there's a room, dedicated room, to the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And that's my favorite room. On any given day, I can have a new favorite, but that's my favorite room because it speaks to the power and the perseverance that so many people had then for equitable educational opportunities. And you're here tonight to engage in conversation as part of that process for our state. So I applaud you for being here. We thank you for being here. Education is such an important part of our future. Thank you all for engaging in this opportunity. And I'll now turn it over to our education leaders in the state at this time. Thank you.
I'm going to remove my mask because it'll be a little bit easier to speak that way. I appreciate those remarks. I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Chelsea Crawford. I am Chief of Staff at the Tennessee Department of Education. Thank you to Russell Wigginton for having us here, President of the National Civil Rights Museum. Thank you to all of you for being here with us tonight, taking times out of your personal lives and schedules to join us for a really important conversation. I also want to acknowledge that we have a number of important folks who are here in this room to hear and participate in this conversation. Those include elected officials. Those include some directors of schools from our local school districts. They include principals. They include teachers. They include parents. They include students. So thank you all for being here for what will be a very, very important conversation that we will begin here momentarily. I want to give you just a little bit of information about how this event will work. Obviously, we have a huge opportunity ahead of us as the state is pursuing a really strong public engagement process to discuss the future of education funding as it relates to our public school students here in the state of Tennessee. I know that this is a really important topic, and I also know that it is near and dear to probably all of our hearts. We are here tonight to hear from you. We'll begin this evening by hearing just a few remarks from Commissioner Penny Schwinn, who is over the Tennessee Department of Education. But then what we are going to have is actually a period of public comment from all of you. I'm going to take a moment to point to this QR code. Many of you have already signed up when you checked in at the registration desk out front. This is how you can sign up to speak tonight for a couple of minutes and talk to us about what it is that you have hopes, dreams, vision for in the future as it relates to public education funding in our state. So if you have not yet signed up, you've got a couple minutes left to do that. So please take out your phone and scan that QR code. At the conclusion of my remarks, we will close the sign-up list for speaking. I know we could stay here all night. I'm certain we can do that. We want to be very respectful of your time. We want to be respectful of each other, and we want to hear from you, from as many of you as we possibly can. Before we get started, I want to make sure to say the Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations tonight on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing the public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in a new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the new proposed funding formula. I want to reiterate what I've just said in a long way. We are talking about the future tonight. We want to hear from you about what you would like to see in public education for your students in the future. Those of you who have signed up to speak tonight, we will all have about 2 minutes. And I want to tell you exactly how this is going to work because we've got a full room with lots of folks, and we're going to have some microphones so that we can ensure everyone can be heard. When it is time for your speaking, your slot, I will call your name. I will also call the name of the individual who is up next to speak. That way we can have a microphone prepared for the person who is immediately on deck to share their comments and the person after that. Each individual will have 2 minutes. I am going to essentially step away from the microphone when your 2 minutes begin. And when your 2 minutes are about up, I will step back closer to the microphone as a friendly reminder to wrap up your time. We want to make sure that everyone who wants to be heard can be heard tonight. Also make sure to use those 2 minutes really wisely. We want to hear from you about what you would like to see in the future. So with that, we are going to close the check-in, so please be sure to finish that up. At this point in time, I will invite Commissioner Penny Schwinn to the microphone to talk a little bit about public education funding in the state, where we're going from here. Thank you all.
Good evening. It's nice to see so many people here and what is going to be an important conversation that matters for the futures of our students. And so I want to start by kind of why we are here, why we think now is the time to have a conversation about funding in the state of Tennessee, why we are thinking about a new formula and what this can mean for our schools and our districts and most importantly our students across the state of Tennessee. I think what we all know is that parents want what's best for their children. We also know that every child is different. I've got 2 girls in public school. I call them salt and pepper. They could not be more different, and they're going to need different things when they go through the school systems. I want to make sure, and I think we all want to make sure as parents, that our children have every opportunity to be successful and to thrive. But I also want to be clear about what this is. This is a conversation about public school funding. I'm going to say it again, As I said, I'd like to say for the people in the back, one more time, this is about public school funding. What we want to make sure is that our public schools here in the state, that we have an opportunity for everybody to contribute to the conversation. Every single voice matters. Every single voice will be included. We are all experts in our own experience. And what we want to do when we're thinking about the future, when we're thinking about building a new school funding formula together, it requires all of us to come together and provide proactive solutions, to provide ideas, to say this is what would have been so helpful for me, this is what I want for my child, this is what I want for my community. That aspirational, forward-thinking, positive, proactive lens is going to be critical for this process. We'll talk a little bit about how this process is going to work. So we have 18 subcommittees. We wanted to be as thorough as possible, representing lots of points of view. We have urban, suburban, municipals, we have rural, we have economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, we have English learner subcommittees. We have subcommittees representing our workforce to see what the needs might be for our graduates who they will be hiring. Subcommittees on higher education. We want to make sure that if we are talking about building a formula for all of Tennessee, that everyone knows that they have a place in this conversation. From a process perspective, there are lots of ways to engage. So people who are live streaming in know that you too can engage. We have town halls scheduled across the state. We have an email address that's open. You can submit as many comments as you want, as long as you want. We'll have Twitter town halls. We also know that community organizations across the state will host their own town halls. All of that information will get consolidated and submitted to the department. What we will do is then we will take all those public comments, no matter who you are and where you live. All of those public comments will get coded to one or more subcommittees. They will have the opportunity to review and talk about and discuss the rich public feedback that we're receiving. Those subcommittees, made up of Tennesseans from across the state, will then provide recommendations to the steering committee. The steering committee is made of those people who have been elected into office and appointed to either the finance or education committees in the House and the Senate. Because ultimately, if we are to propose a new formula, the process has to include everybody, and it also has to go to a General Assembly who may or may not vote on it. But I want to be really clear that a really good process for policy development has to include everybody. All of us are Tennesseans. We all have a voice in this. Every single perspective and viewpoint should be counted and considered, no matter where you live, no matter what your perspective. We are likely to hear a lot of different viewpoints tonight. If it's anything like last night, there are a lot of different experiences that we've had, ways that we think about this challenge, and solutions that we want for our students. We've had really productive dialogue so far. I'm excited about what we're going to hear from all of the different perspectives and viewpoints. I strongly encourage you to think about what you want. It is really easy to tear down. It is much harder to build up. What we are trying to do is to build something new and to create a vision and a future for our students that we know and can deeply believe in will push their futures forward, that will allow them to thrive. So I encourage you to think about what you want, what you would like to see funded, why that matters, and what it will do to move our students and therefore our state forward. Taking a step back and just saying, as a mom, this matters a lot to me personally. I am the product of public schools. My mom was a public school teacher. My sister's a public school teacher. We both married public school teachers, and my whole family is. It's kind of what we do. It's our family tradition. And when I think about what I wish were true when I was going through schools, when I was in priority schools, when my mom moved me 10 miles up the road and I went to a very different school that was resourced very differently, it's personal. And I want the best possible education for my girls, but I want that same education for every single one of those 1 million students in this state. It is personal, and it is personal to everyone in this room, and it is possible. The energy around what is possible for funding in this state is real. There is momentum, and I hope you all take advantage of this opportunity to let your voice be heard and help us create something that matters and can make an impact on every single child in the state. I thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to see what happens tonight in our discussion ahead. So thank you very much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and get this started. I will introduce to you two individuals who are going to be handling microphones for us tonight. This is Victoria Robinson here and Scott Meltzer. The first person who will be speaking this evening is Ms. Peggy Watkins. So Peggy, if you would not mind to please raise your hand, you will kick us off this evening. I see you, Peggy. We will bring a microphone to you. The next person who will speak is Michelle Mckissack. So Ms. Mckissack, if you could raise your hand for us, we will find you. I see you right here, and we will have a mic ready for you to speak next. At this point in time, Ms. Watkins, feel free to go ahead and get started with your 2 minutes.
You can hold it. You can hold it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. Many parents in our area have subsidized local public education for many years. Myself, over 25 years, whether it's donating money for supplies or purchasing books so that each student can have their own copy and not have to share between 3 students. We all want the best needs for our students met. We all want the best education and services for our children. However, there's a lot of work to do to meet those goals in Tennessee. In a report I read today by the Education Law Center, they list Tennessee as performing across the board poorly. My hope is that everyone on these 18 committees, and that the members of the steering committee especially, lay aside their partisanship and focus on the task at hand, and that is concentrate on providing the educational needs for all the children and not see this as another business opportunity. We have historic reserves. Let's use the money where it counts the most. Invest in our future, our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Watkins. Our next speaker is Michelle Mckissack. After Michelle will be Teresa Short. Teresa, if you would raise your hand, I see you here. We'll have a microphone for you. Ms. Mckissack, please feel free to go ahead and get started.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Mckissack, and I have a wonderful, unique perspective of being chair of the Shelby County School Board, but I'm also a parent of 4 children, 3 of whom just graduated from Shelby County Schools in 2016, 2020, and 2021. And then I've got a daughter who's currently in 5th grade. But I care about all the children of our school district. We are the largest school district in this state. And the previous speaker, she said it so eloquently. All we want, Commissioner, and we know that you care deeply about children. I've met with you on many occasions. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, I see our superintendent back here. He's just so quietly standing in the very back of the room. Dr. Joris Wright, thank you so much. He's got so much going on. Yeah, I know he's going to another event, but I wanted to mention him. But we just want children to be happy, to learn and to go to school and enjoy the process, and go to school in buildings that are not crumbling, quite honestly. We have so many old buildings here in the Memphis area, and we just can't keep up right now with the funding that we have. We want to be able to offer more AP classes to students in every school, no matter what zip code they're living in. There's just opportunities. That's all we want. We just want every child to have that opportunity to go to school, to enjoy it, to be in a beautiful, bright building, and just to not have any limitations. And so I guess I could maybe say something a little bit more eloquently, but that's just what I'm feeling from my heart. I'm a graduate of this school district, along with my siblings and my nieces and nephews, and all the children out there. We just want them to have more and to look upon it. And I'm glad you mentioned about equity instead of just being equal, because there are different needs in different places. And so we want to make sure we're serving all the children, every child. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mckissack, and I will say y'all are doing great with the 2 minutes. I appreciate that very much. All right, Ms. Short, you are ready to go next. Our following speaker will be Sarah Carpenter. Sarah, please raise your hand. I see you in orange. We'll get a microphone over to you. Ms. Short, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
Hi guys, this is kind of my first time going through all of this stuff. I have actually written the commissioner here letters before. I have a special need child that's in pre-K, so I have a very different view as well. One of the issues that I have is that because he's in pre-K and he's so young, we do not have any funding in our pre-K systems for special need children. Last year, he got set so far back with COVID, as I'm sure a lot of these children got set back with COVID. Children in K through 12 or even K through 6, they were able to have an extended learning year and able to go to summer school. He wasn't allowed to have that. They didn't have funding, is what the principal told me. We don't have funding for that. So I had to go and find private schools that I could try to get him in, paying out of my pocket to get him education, try to get him caught up to where he needs to be. One of the other things that I did really want to look at and point out is that even this year, because of the funding, and again, I'm in Fayette County schools, so we don't have a great big school district there. We don't get as much funding. As you probably will know, Fayette County schools are one of the lowest in Tennessee on the list. It was a month and a half until the school year before we even got a special K teacher. That hurts. I couldn't do that to him again. I had to pull him out and put him in a private therapy group 4 days a week. He goes to school, public school, 1 day a week just for the socialization. My want for the schools and for this funding is to have better pay for teachers so that we can keep good teachers in these schools. To have better pay for the teachers' assistants so they'll have quality people there that's going to stay and that's going to help them. It's going to help them know what they need to do to be able to have training for these teachers so that they'll know how to be able to handle these special needs students. Otherwise, they don't know what to do. When a child has a meltdown because they're autistic, teachers don't know how to handle them. We need this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fort. Thank you. Our next speaker is Sarah Carpenter. Following Sarah Carpenter is Danette Stokes. Danette, if you could raise your hand, I see you here. We'll bring a microphone to you. Ms. Carpenter, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming to hear what the people had to say, and especially our parents at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much for that. If we go to student-based funding, how would that help children in struggling communities and struggling schools? And what accountability process will be in place? I mean, we keep throwing good money at bad money. So I just want, that's what's been asked of me, and so I'm asking of you now. Thank you. My 2 minutes. I beat the 2 minutes.
I think the commissioner is going to answer part of that question.
I'm going off script. Yep. So I think this is really important and something we didn't have a chance to talk about in the beginning. But when we're talking about a student-based funding formula, as Ms. Carpenter said, we're talking about looking at the individual needs of every student and then saying if that child has an additional need, then we would fund more for that. Child is an English learner, a little bit more. Maybe it's a child in an urban community, a little bit more. A child who is in K through 2 because we care a lot about literacy and small class sizes. Maybe that's a little bit more. We want to ensure that from a transparency perspective for the public, that a parent could go and see exactly what the resources are for their child. I should be able to say, this is how much money the state funds and for what. We want to make sure that we're doing that and thinking about individual children so that we know affirmatively that we are supporting the needs of every single child. That collectively goes to our public school districts for distribution. It also does allow for better and easier reporting, which I know we get grilled at pretty good in the General Assembly. And so we want to make sure that no matter what, parents know how much money is going for their children. Districts have something that is predictable and understandable. They also have something that funds the needs of their communities, and that the spending of that is very transparent for the public. So I appreciate that question and that comment, and I know that you've been really supportive of ensuring that every child has a chance and that we have a way to fund a chance for every child. So thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that was helpful to talk a little bit more about the subject at hand and might spark some more questions. So Ms. Stokes, you are up next. I think we've got a microphone here for you, ma'am. Our next speaker will be Paul Garner. So Paul, if you could raise your hand for us. I see you back here. We'll bring a mic to you, sir. Ms. Stokes, please go ahead.
All right, so good evening. And thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for having us. My name is Danette Stokes. I'm a second grade teacher in Shelby County Schools, and I am the president of the United Education Association, which is the affiliate of Tennessee Education Association and the National Education Association. So I stand before you representing educators across Shelby County. And as you all know, we are ranked number 44 across the state in funding. So my question is, by changing the formula in this way that you all had mentioned about doing, and changing that formula, is this a way to like backdoor vouchers? Because of course, vouchers is a concern of ours. And then what's wrong with the formula that we have now, besides it needs to be fully funded, of course, for students. The other question I have is, will this plan avoid incentivizing pay for test scores? Will it be a part of that? Will that have any effect on the test scores? Let's see. So what is your plan for, what is your time frame, I guess, for rolling out this funding plan? And my hope is that you all will fully fund us because, next to Mississippi, if it wasn't for Mississippi, basically, we would be last as far as funding. Let's see here, what else do I have? So these are questions that are coming from educators, so I want to make sure I do get these questions asked. Okay. Oh, what other state funding plans are you all considering? Yes, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stokes. The commissioner will respond to a couple of those things, and then we'll keep it moving. Thank you.
You're testing my memory a little bit, but I'm going to try. I think I got 3 of the 5, so you tell me the 2 that I missed. So I will say this is a public school funding formula. Anything related to ESAs or vouchers would have to be a completely separate policy. This is about public schools in the state of Tennessee. I want to be very clear. This is not about anything else but public school funding. The other thing on timeline, what we've been looking at, that was the 4th one, I got it. The 4th one was on what states are we looking at. So I'm going to merge those together. We have looked at every state in the country. So we did a 50-state analysis to see what their funding formula is, how they are funded, what they fund, and the last time they did an overhaul. What we've seen across the country is that to actually get something that is real and get movement on it, it has been a very short, laser-focused process, and it has been done quickly with a lot of time for rollout and implementation. What we are trying to do is to do that, but include a lot of community engagement. I think the Tennessee way is to ensure that people have voices, and it's got to be part of this policy creation process. And so that's part of the timeline. We've got 90 days to really have these conversations, and a lot of them, and that's going to really help us work through the process in terms of development. In terms of the current funding formula, I will say similar to what Chelsea said, that is in litigation, and we will let that play out, and that is why we are focusing so clearly on what a new formula could be. What this is and how this is different is that this is about funding the needs of every individual student and not a collective aggregate. My favorite example that we've used a lot is really thinking about if I have a child over here and they have a lot of needs, but maybe those needs aren't the same as the rest or aggregate of the district doesn't necessarily get the same focus on that funding if we don't actually fund the needs of that student. We want to make sure we are doing every single student gets what that student needs. That's what a student-based funding formula would be. In terms of, I think the last one was on was it incentives for teachers? Outcomes, that's right, test scores, there it is. Okay, I was like, oh, I was so close. I got one word, not the other 2. So for incentivizing, no, that's part of the conversation. I think truly what we know is that we want to look at what it would be to build a student-based funding formula. The what of what goes into that formula is what we need feedback on. You all can tell us, this is what we think is important to include. This is what we think has to be in there, must be in there. This is what should be in there, and this is what's a nice to have. And so part of that is going to be the conversation. I think that what we would want to do is really talk about incentivizing opportunities. So how do we increase AP access, as we heard earlier? How do we ensure that students have access to art and music? We heard that last night. And so it's really about identifying the resources that we want in our schools and then thinking about what that could mean in a formula. So I appreciate that question.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to go back to public comment. The next speaker we have is Paul Garner, who's over here. Following Paul will be Mr. Michael Pleasant. So, Michael, if you would raise your hand. Michael Pleasant. Oh, there you are. I see you. We'll bring you a mic. Mr. Garner, please go ahead and get started with your 2 minutes.
All right, good evening, everybody. And I just want to say that it's awesome to see a packed room on a rainy night in Memphis. To me, that says that this is a community that cares deeply about education equity here in Memphis and Shelby County. My name is Paul Garner. I work with Stanford Children as the Tennessee Regional Organizing Director, where we focus on education funding and policy largely. And in my work over time, I've gotten the chance to visit a lot of different schools in the district, and as well as charter schools. And the difference when we talk about equity is stark. I mean, I've seen beautiful school facilities where there's music played in between classes at certain schools, and other schools have no doors on bathroom stalls. The facilities are in disarray. There's paint peeling off walls. There's water leaking from the gym ceiling, mold that develops as a result of this. So I want to echo calls for equity in school facilities, as well as thinking about the way that we fund school nurses, school behavioral specialists, school counselors. I know the state of Tennessee does a lot to incentivize putting police around our children in schools, but we're not, I don't think, committing the same type of equity to preventing situations before they start with restorative practices that could be provided by a more equitable number of counselors. And I can't imagine being a school counselor with 400 plus students in my caseload. I don't know about y'all, but if I've got 400 things that I'm trying to do all at the same time, I'm not going to do any of those things well. So bringing that more into something manageable and supportive for our young people. I want to echo the calls for teacher pay and good pay for these school counselors. If we're going to bring in school counselors and additional resources to wrap around, that's why we call them wraparound services, because we are wrapping around support around our young people. But to do that, we have to be able to retain those folks. And I know so many educators and school counselors that have left the district over the last year and a half, 2 years, because they just can't sustain it for their own families anymore. So we have to commit to our young people, and to do that, we also need to commit to our teachers and our school staff. And in particular, I think we need to be bringing more resources in schools, as well as connecting our young people to technology, making sure that all of them have devices, because this may not be the last time we have a big shutdown because of a COVID or something else, heaven forbid. But we need to be ready and prepared and not just reacting. We need to be proactive in making sure our young people have everything they need. Thank you.
Mr. Garner, thank you so much for those comments. I will say you got a lot in for a couple minutes, so thank you for doing that. Next up, we're going to hear from Mr. Michael Pleasant. Our next speaker is Teresina Wright. So Teresina, if you would raise your hand, I see you here. We'll get a mic to you. Mr. Pleasant, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
Hey, thanks. My name is Mike Pleasance. I'm a teacher over at Manassas High School and a parent of a beautiful little baby girl over at Snowden Elementary. I taught for many years. When I first started teaching, I remember the original TEM rollout, the teacher effectiveness measure, which was based on a lot of research that we were told a lot about in many different meetings. And we were introduced to a large pie chart that showed that teachers were the most important part of teacher effectiveness, or I'm sorry, of student achievement that we could control. Teacher effectiveness was the most significant part on this chart of student achievement that was under our control, but it was by far not the largest. The largest parts of this pie chart were community, peer groups, and family. They took up over 2/3 of the chart, and they showed us that these other factors we couldn't control were very significant, but we needed to focus on what we could. I just really worry about, when we talk about this new model that's supposed to be more following the student, the funding is going to go with them, that speaks to me of this market-based model where students are going to move away from supposed bad schools and to supposed good schools. But the biggest factor that is making a school bad or good is a concentration of well-resourced students who are more likely to have had preschool, to have had parents in the home that had more time to spend with their children when they were young. That we know about the million-word gap of there's some students who are highly achieving have heard this many more words by a certain age than other students who are lower achieving, and those gaps and inequities. One of the most effective ways to address them is certainly good teaching, but also positive peer groups. If you take all of the well-resourced students who have the advantages and take them away and concentrate them in one group, that may be good for many of those students. It will take a lot of experience away from them, but it's very, very bad for all the rest. It's incredibly inequitable. In Shelby County schools, we have the best model to address this. It's the optional model. You know, that method of having concentrated peer groups within a normal population, that is the way to address this. I mean, we just don't talk about selectivity in private schools, but in public schools, but in private schools, selectivity is the engine that makes one school better than another. Being able to get better, more resourced students. Same thing in charter schools. I just don't want to see this market-based approach coming to a system that is supposed to be promoting equity for all students.
Thank you so much for your comments. Mr. Pleasant? We will hear now from Teresina Wright, who is over here up front. Our next speaker is Ms. Renee Smith. So if Renee can raise her hand, we will get a microphone over to you, ma'am. Ms. Wright, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
All right, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening, and I want to also thank you, Commissioner Schwinn, for making sure that you hear our questions and also hear our thoughts surrounding this topic. I have 2 questions on this evening. Some schools have struggled to meet the unique needs of special students population because they have a higher concentration of students with these needs compared to other schools and districts. How will the new program take this issue into consideration? Also, the BEP currently funds the special needs population in a 4-tiered model, and it covers several different categories, correct? And so, how will a new formula reflect each student, and what can parents expect to see differently?
The commissioner will answer that question.
Yeah, so I think a really great example of when we look at a student-based formula, and I want to be very clear about the difference to kind of address a misconception here. There's student-based formula, which is how the money is generated. A money follows the student is what you do with it. That's not what we're talking about. That is local policy. What we are talking about is how the funding is generated to begin with for the local school district. What that means for a student with disabilities is if, let's say you have a student, there is a base formula that every student receives as part of a formula. We know that there are different needs, especially within the disability community, about what needs to be funded. That would allow for a weight or additional funding to be attached to that student to meet that student's needs. And so that allows for more personalization. It also allows us to make sure that we're meeting the needs of that child as opposed to thinking about it in an aggregate. And so I think that that's a really good example of some of the benefits when you think about your own child and how that might, a new formula might be able to benefit the individual. So I appreciate that question.
Thank you so much. Next up is Renee Smith. Our next speaker will be Mr. Nathan Washington. So Nathan, if you would raise your hand. I see you here, sir. We'll get a microphone to you. Ms. Smith, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
In 2005, the funding to the Memphis City Schools was $325. Today, it's over $2 billion. That's not counting the municipalities. So we get $2 billion, and only a small percentage of our children can actually read and do math. The TVAR scores that just came out, it's over 200 schools in this city. It's over 200. Only 4 are level 5. 4 are level 4. 13 are level 3. All the rest of them are below 3. That's here in our city. I just want to know, all this funding, what are we going to put towards our children learning to read?
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith. I think we've got a response from the commissioner. You good?
Yeah, I've got a question, I'm going to answer. It's a good question, and I think that's part of what I am hoping. And again, I know that some of you didn't come prepared to talk about this in particular, so please submit anything that you have in writing also after this meeting, because I think it's an important point about when you have a new funding formula or any funding formula, what is the way that we communicate effectively and transparently to the public? How do we make sure it's done in a way that people understand it? And then how do we ensure that we're providing enough professional development and support for our districts, for our teachers, for our parents, for our business leaders, and for our communities to have those local conversations about distribution and effectiveness? And so one of the things that I think has got to be part of the conversation is making sure everyone can equally engage. Right now, I think that we have some challenges because it's really hard to understand school funding formulas. They are inherently complex. And so whether you are a parent, a teacher, a superintendent, a principal, or anybody else, it's hard to engage and know where you can have impact, where you can have voice. And so I think one of the things that we would like to do as part of this larger conversation is to hear that needs assessment about what we need to do as a state to make this more clear and publicly transparent, and also to make clear how, no matter what position or where you sit within your community and school community, you know how to have a voice and engage productively with your teachers, with your school districts, with one another. And so I appreciate that and encourage you all to give us ideas about the best way and most effective way to have some of those conversations. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next speaker we are going to hear from is Nathan Washington. We are bringing a mic to you, sir. Following Mr. Washington is Laconis Brandon. May you, here you are. Here we are. Yes, ma'am. Okay, we'll get a microphone down to you. Mr. Washington, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
Alrighty. My name is Nate. I work for Tennesseans for Student Success. The reason I am here today is, seeing all of you folks here today. We have created an advocacy program. It's called Fuel, because we believe all of you folks here in the room are going to be the fuel that gets a good quality BEP passed. What we're hoping to do is to take all of your voices and get them in front of the folks who are actually going to be making these decisions in the legislature. We don't care who you vote for. We're not going to tell you who to vote for. I'll be standing outside at the end of this, and if you want to walk up and talk to me, I got a card with a QR code. I'll take down your information, and we'll get everything you got to say up there to the folks in the legislature. And I'll give one of my minutes over here to Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Hunt with Tennessee Can. Nate and I work together as part of a coalition statewide. So I'll be attending all these town halls. So like he said, I want to echo his statements. We want to elevate your voices. If you would like to talk to your state legislators about this, we're happy to put you in touch. We're also having a call on November 8th at 11 a.m. Central Time, kind of to talk about the funding formula and what it actually does and what a student-based formula might look like. So if you're interested in joining that, we have the QR codes against the wall and flyers outside, and I also have cards. So thanks, and thanks for the support. The energy in this room is really great, and the fact that all of y'all care so much about your community is really a testament. And Sarah Carpenter also knows how to get in touch with us. We work with her closely, the mother of Memphis over here, and Memphis Lift is awesome. So thank y'all.
Thank you both. That's the first time we've had someone share 2 minutes, so I appreciate you keeping it under, even though you shared. Next up, Laconis Brandon. Our following speaker will be Nicole Wilkins Jackson. So Nicole, I see you right here. We will bring a microphone to you. Ms. Brandon, please go ahead and get started.
Everything that's been said here is kind of just taken away. So, I mean, it's like, what do I say now? But there's so much to say when it comes to our education. My name is Laconis Brandon. I'm a 5th grade science teacher at Millington Municipal School District, also the president of our Millington Municipal Education Association. Awesome to see my superintendent here, Bo Griffin, as a representative also. ACEs. We need help with our young children who have so many experiences at a young age and don't know how to deal with them. We need support. As a teacher, it hurts my heart to see a child who has parents in jail, raised by the grandparents, raised by the aunts and uncles, older siblings. The support, how do I expect them to come to school every day and feel like this is where I'm supposed to be to become a better person? You talk to them, you tell them, you nurture them, you love on them, and at the end of the day, they still have to go home to the same problem. They need real services. We need to be able to support our children and know that they are the future, that they are needed, that they are loved. Just the teacher ourselves and the counselors that are there, they do awesome, but it's resources there that they need that's deeper than just the teacher and just the counselor and just the principal, because those families need support also. Funding for our schools is what we're here about, but funding for our school is not successful if our kids are not successful. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Ms. Brandon, thank you so much. Before we go to our next speaker, I want to do just a quick reminder. I am having no trouble hearing you all from up here, but I think maybe some are. So when you do have the microphone, just kind of keep it closer to your mouth.
Okay.
I think we heard you. I think we heard it. But just so that everybody can hear, just try and keep the microphone close to your mouth. Our next speaker is Miss Nicole Wilkins Jackson. Next up will be Brett Lawson. So Brett, if you could raise your hand. I see you back here, sir. We'll bring you a mic. Miss Wilkins Jackson, please go ahead and get started.
Good evening, everybody. First, you all were saying that you all have some more funding that you're gonna have for the school, and when you have more funding for the school, it's gonna be for the children. And since my child did not start school till after October because of the situation, the pandemic and the trauma that she was going through, when I went to the school, no funding was there for her because they already sent the books up, and I'm like, because I wanted her to go to a school out of her district, because the district we're in, the school is a failing school. But we had to choose a failing school because that's our district. But when I tried to send her to another school, because the funding was gone, but you all have this new whatever protocol you have, will it follow the child whenever the child starts school? So the teacher won't be saying, we don't have no funding, so we can't accept no kid, It's all about funding, it's not about the kids no more. And that's what we took from her. It's like, we just gonna close the door because no money here, not to teach the kids. And secondly, every community, even the community that I'm in, and I did notice, I did not know about the funding that the kids have to have when going to school. Now I notice why schools are, looking poor, not getting stuff, because my child, like a lot of children started school late. And so they didn't get no funding, but the classroom are crowded. So the kids not getting what they supposed to get. You probably get a laptop that work. If it don't work, guess what? It's gonna take another 8 weeks, or you can go get, you probably have to go get another computer or a tablet. But because of funding, that's all they talk about, funding. I'm like, man, it's always about funding. Everything is about money. It's not about the kids. I just want my child to learn. So, but I got to have funding every time. I like my child because it missed. That's all they keep bringing up, even within their own district.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilkins Jackson. Our next speaker is Brett Lawson. After Brett will be Gisela Guerrero. Gisela, I see you over here, we'll bring a mic over to you. Mr. Lawson, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a golden opportunity, and just couldn't pass it up. Can't believe I stood up before Bob Nardo. But I have comments in just a couple of buckets. First, I want to say I applaud this effort. I've seen student-based funding in the past, and it has resulted in good results for students. So I think this is a good direction to move in for the state of Tennessee as a whole. 2 buckets, just in terms of individual student needs. I hope that the differentiation for economically disadvantaged students is absolutely aggressive. For the individual student, that is a must. And then for students with special needs, just please making sure that we keep in mind that there are different levels of needs, and the IEP should drive the amount of funding and the disproportionality for those students. In some cases, it can be 4 and 5 times as much as normal funding needed for those students. So hope that we keep that in mind and look at what's really spent for those students when we bring them into the school and serve them well. Then beyond just the individual needs, I hope that this funding formula takes into account schools that are in districts with direct taxing authority that's uncomplicated, and that kind of points to the ability to raise money for capital improvements on their own versus having to wait and work through somebody else and lots of different organizations to get that work done. And that goes to some of the facility issues. Our students all deserve to be in extremely well-lit, well-cared for, well-maintained facilities, and that's not always the case. Despite best intentions. The next thing in that bucket would be percent of economically disadvantaged students inside of a school. So concentrated, pervasive generational poverty in a school is different from a few students that are economically disadvantaged in another school. It's got to be treated differently. The idea around having restorative practice specialists, social workers, counselors, even possibly a psychologist on staff within a school to deal with all of the issues that come with that and turn that around. It's very needed. And then also, kind of in that same vein, the percentage of students that have special needs. I'm past my 2 minutes. And last, a measure of accountability that would help us address where we have pervasive staffing needs, where we cannot attract and keep the high-quality teachers that we need to get in front of those students who have all of those needs and address their needs. We need a bigger bucket to draw from to pay those teachers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lawson. I'm glad my cues are working up here. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you being respectful. Next up is Gisela Guerrero. Our following speaker will be Siobhan Davis. Siobhan, you could raise your hand. Oh, I see you. I see you. We will bring a microphone to you. We've got a purple jacket on. All right, Ms. Guerrero, you are good to go with your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. My name is Gisela Guerrero. I am a community organizer with MICA, Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope. I am really excited to be here and see such a packed room. Just everything that has said, I support it. More counselors, more social workers, funding for buildings, which should be a very basic thing. No building should be falling apart, period. I think for me, the bottom line is we are still 44th, ranked 44th in school funding. We spend more than $4,000 less per student than any other place, and that's just not okay. I think while we're speaking about what we would want to and what our hopes could be, I don't see how we can make that happen without adding more funding for public education. Just more funding, period, a bigger bucket, a bigger pie, whatever you want to think about it. We need something more. What we have as of now is not sufficient. We can't just recut the pie in different ways. Additionally, for English learners, we need additional support there. Memphis and all of the state of Tennessee is a growing community with growing immigrant needs, and those need to be addressed. And lastly, for transparency, I appreciate that we're here this evening. I would just like to make sure that we continue to be very true and engaged with this process of remaking the formula. I tried to sign up for a subcommittee. I'm not sure exactly how that process was supposed to go. I didn't really ever hear back. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't get to be on a subcommittee because I would have loved to do that. And I'm sure other folks experience the same thing. But I think top transparency and engagement throughout this whole process. Great start with the town halls, but I want to see it more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Guerrero. Our next speaker is Siobhan Davis. Following Siobhan will be Kristen Johnson. Krista, if you can raise your hand, I see you here. We are round and home base, folks, on the number of speakers tonight. So just hang tight with us. Ms. Davis, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming. You as well, Commissioner. Many schools have struggled to get counselors they need to meet the needs of students for college career readiness due to the restrictedness of the current BEP. How will the new formula allow schools to have a stronger focus on college career readiness?
Trying to avoid the podium. I always think there's kind of a weird balance when we're having a real open conversation. So it's a good question, and I think that if you couldn't hear her, it's how do we think about school counselors, especially when it's about college and career readiness, and how would the new formula address that? I think that that's part of the input. So what I would hear from that is we need to make sure that we have staff and consider that in a weighted student funding formula that would allow for resources at the school site to support college and career readiness. So I think part of that is a needs assessment. What do you want? What do you think is important? And then making sure we can consider that as we build something new. So I think what I'm hearing from you is that that's going to be a priority and something we absolutely need to consider when we're building a formula together. So appreciate that comment and certainly hear that quite a bit across the state. So I think it's echoed by a large majority of Tennesseans that we've heard from. So thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. We'll try to find a wireless mic for you next time. Okay, our next speaker is Kristen Johnson. I have lost track of where, there she is. Kristen,
I moved over
thank
here.
you for reminding me. Our next speaker, I will try to get this name right, Kathy Sachese, S-A-C-H-S-E, Kathy. Okay. Bob Nardo would be following you, ma'am. So Bob, you will be up next. Ms. Johnson, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
All right, I believe I'm being followed by Bob. That's really exciting. Hi, I'm Kristen Johnson. I'm the executive director of All Memphis. All Memphis is Access Language Literacy. And we work with schools to help their teachers become experts in reading, because that's what we need in the classroom to treat the literacy crisis. Like Ms. Smith pointed out earlier, over 80% of our students aren't reading. And something that I'm hearing the commissioner say over and over again is, what can we do about that, and what are our thoughts on that? My thought is RTI. So RTI has really strong bones and really oftentimes weak implementation, because no or very little dollars are put towards response to intervention. And so when we have 80% of students needing that because they're not reading on grade level, the model predicts that 80% of students are going to be successful in the regular classroom. That model is flipped in our county and a lot of counties, a lot of states. And there needs to be more funding allocated to response to intervention to help schools be able to put money and resources to the 80% of students who need it the most, and not remain focused on that 15% that will learn regardless of what the education is. So RTI.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. All right, next up we have Bob Nardo. Following Mr. Nardo will be Robert Matheny. Robert, if you would raise your hand. I see you way back there, sir. We will bring a mic to you. Mr. Nardo, you are ready for your 2 minutes.
I feel like after Brett and Chris, I need to juggle torches or something. But that's what the commissioner is trying to do, forming the funding formula. My name is Bob Nardo, and I'm in my 7th year as the head of Libertas School at Brookmead. This is a neighborhood school turnaround. This was the 2nd lowest performing elementary school in the entire state. And with the support of the Department of Education, we've been able to transform this school to the highest performing charter school in Memphis and in the top 15% in the state for students with disabilities. And I'm incredibly proud of my teachers and parents for those accomplishments. And I think we've learned some things along the way that are really pertinent to this work. And it is that we need a funding formula that provides appropriate dollars for the needs of the individual child and follows them to the school of their choice. And Brett actually was dead on. A wait for students in poverty, particularly significant concentrations. When you have a school where like in a neighborhood school setting, like in Fraser, where some of us work, when the vast majority of your students are in poverty, or when you have a very high concentration of significant special needs, I think what some people just don't understand is that in Tennessee's current funding model, forgive me, just one sentence on it, a middle-class, typically abled child has the same amount of funding associated with them as a child with cerebral palsy in a high-poverty community. It's ludicrous, and it creates absurd incentives for schools. We've only been able to combat it at our school thanks to incredibly generous support from the department. They invested in school turnaround and provided school improvement and turnaround funds that allowed us to do things like lower class sizes, provide rich and personalized curriculum, provide intensive tutoring and social and emotional support for the trauma issues that we're talking about. And so I think that the support we've been given in a school turnaround is really the model for what you can do, I think, with the state. And so I think that the facility piece that Brett talked about is crucial too. I know that's hard to do in the base funding formula. Maybe there's an incentive or match model that could be looked at. But I think the students in poverty and special ed concentration is crucial to be able to provide the continuum of services that kids need and to do what the state has helped us to do. The last thing I'd say is the accountability piece is crucial. I couldn't agree more strongly. And I think the way to do it is to have a school accountability model that holds schools accountable for growth, primarily, how well you do with the children in front of you. But that's another reform. Thank you so much.
Mr. Nardo, thank you so much. Delivered in style of a true educator with the number 2 pencil in your hand. I'm impressed. Okay, next up we are going to go to Mr. Robert Matheny in the back here. Following Mr. Matheny will be Risa Catrone. So Risa, if you want to speak? Yep, we'll bring a microphone to you here, ma'am. Mr. Matheny, you are good to go with your 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for getting the last name right on your very first try. I'm in my 51st year as a minister and advocate for public education and justice in Memphis. And I have 3 points, but I want my friend Dr. Robinson to hold me accountable that it's not a 3-point sermon, okay? The first is just an amen or second or third to the motion about counselors in schools. We desperately need to have more. The statistics about how many there are in relation to the number of students in the schools is staggeringly insufficient. It blows your mind to see. And I thought it was so poignant. Our speaker earlier, who was talking about so many situations of home life that our teachers and schools confront. So that's point one. Number two, I hope that there will be some consciousness in some ways, maybe not even things that cost in the budget, but just a sensitivity to the possibilities in relation of nonprofits, churches, synagogues, mosques, to schools. In our particular case of my denomination, a few years ago, we actually voted overwhelmingly that every local church would reach out to the nearest public school and do something in terms of after school, adopt a school, those kinds of things. I think that's a hidden resource in some communities that could be tapped more. And last but not least, I guess, let's be very, very careful about this whole thing called vouchers. I think there's some truth to this thing of a possible backdoor problem. There's truth to your pointing out that, well, now this is about public education and not that, but we can't always separate those. And let's put ourselves in the shoes of the legislator, okay? And let's say he or she is facing the issue. They may, in mind, say, I'm going to vote for about such and such a figure for education. And in that mind, they're counting vouchers and the regular budget. And they wind up, maybe in some cases unintentionally, cheating the most important priorities by the virtue of having the voucher. And it might also tempt me, if I'm that legislature, to go with vouchers because, hey, that's more popular and it would help me get reelected in my particular district. So let's overcome that. Can I get an amen?
Thank you so much for your comments. Next up is our second to last speaker, Ms. Riesel Catrone. Following that is Karen Spencer. Karen, if you could raise your hand. I see you way back there. Okay, Ms. Catrone, you are up with your 2 minutes.
My name is Riesel Catron, and I'm going to stick to this topic here. It says, what is important to you in a student-focused public education and funding strategy? What is important to me as a mother in the area of 38141, Shelby County School area? I want my children to have the same education as his children. I would like for my children special needs to be met same as her child. I would like for my children to be given the chance for them to be met where they at, which is, like others said, I am a mother of child with developmental delay, which we did not get the assistance to where my child was to be brought up where he needed to be, and therefore the system with the money did not meet him, so he's starting to be a statistic. So with the money, can the things start be going and being used where it's supposed to be? Can our children be got where they're at and brought where they're supposed to be that is promised to us? Can I please see actual people that care in the school system that is receiving the funds to do their jobs? Can I be a mother and proactively work with the school that has the money to teach my children what I don't know how?
Thank you so much. Appreciate those comments. Our last speaker of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, is Karen Spencer, and she is all the way in the back corner. So, Ms. Spencer, please stand up and tell us what you would like to say for 2 minutes.
First of all, thank you all for being here. Lexi would like to say something.
I would like to go into the school of Southwind. At least I was bullied at that school. Some kids have bullied all the schools. At least it been fair on Southwind High School.
You want me to finish it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm at the belief that when sisters run the village, everybody gonna eat. Her mother is up front. Lexi was having a panic attack and an anxiety attack, and I took her to the bathroom to talk to her. That looks like a scream room for children in communities that are going through bullying. When I was over PACE, parent and community engagement, we had parents to come in. Sometimes when children are being bullied, just a crazy auntie standing there looking at people would deter some of what's going on. Lexi, honey, could you sit down for a minute? Okay. Okay, let me get my paper. You be the big girl and hold the paper. Yeah. I, like Lexi, have a disability. To look at me, you wouldn't know that I had a disability. I have 7 daughters and 1 son. I had a car accident. Somebody was on the phone, and they crashed my car. So I asked one of the people on the wall over there to get me a piece of paper so I wouldn't lose my train of thought, because I was listening to everything, and what I had to say, I needed to write it down. That's what a disability looks like. So you're looking at a disability. I'd like to give a shout out to Judge Carolyn Addison. Just like I've taken my sister's child, I take foster children in. All of mine are grown. The lowest score to graduate in my house was a 3.7. I'm not finna play with it. So shout out to Carolyn Addison. Hold it up so I can see, baby. Okay, yes, thank you. How do you learn at school with your stomach touching your back? I serve in a community where there is a high rate of everything from food insecurities to teen pregnancies. 38106 and 38126. South Memphis, I love you. Hold it still, okay. Thank you. By me doing foster care, I didn't know until I went into just Carolyn Addison's classroom, courtroom, that the children get an EBT card. I didn't know that. So if I'm an advocate for children and I stay in Nashville, the governor knows my name. If I didn't know that, how do you think the grandmothers who are not computer savvy will go online to find out? I know there's funding for community activists and community partners to go to some of these grandmothers who it isn't their fault that their children are cutting up like they've never been up under their anointing, and they're in their 70s and having to raise and train children. The last thing, we need more people in the classrooms and around the schools, because 3 weeks ago, in the Latino Latin community, a man came through there with a gun, brandishing it at the elementary school students. When the students went to tell the principal, they didn't take it seriously. So when they contacted me, I'm also the lead to Black Lives Matter Healing and Butterfly Committee. So when the children got in touch with me, I said, 3 weeks ago, someone went to the principal and told them that somebody had a gun, brandishing me. It took 4 children getting shot the first part of the year. Is there not funding so parents and grandparents can stand there or stay in the school? So, like I said, I'm the crazy auntie. I can stand up there with my hands on my hip and a switch in my hand, and they were like, oh, what's wrong with you? What I do? Nothing. I'm just here to make sure you don't do nothing. So let's look more on the emotional funding, the mental funding. These children are reaching out. I don't think I would, I was scared of my mama. I wouldn't have took no gun to school or nothing. I'll sing like a canary. But let's try to get these children what they need, especially with the bullying. I know there's some funding somewhere, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Spencer. I appreciate those remarks. Okay. That will bring us to the close of our public comment period this evening. We will hear from Commissioner Schwinn with some quick wrap-up remarks, and then we'll send you all home to eat some dinner. So please, Commissioner.
All right. I just wanted to say personally, thank you all for being out here and speaking your truth about what you want for public education. There's 3 things that I hope we can take away. We've taken away quite a bit. I've got some video footage that I'm going to be watching because I cannot remember every single thing that was said by memory. But know that every single comment that we are hearing today, every single comment that is submitted over the next 3 months will be received, reviewed, and then submitted to subcommittees. That being said, please do not let this be the last time you engage. Please do not let this be the last time. This is a launch of something that I hope will trigger many more conversations in your communities. You can have town halls on your block. You can have town halls in your churches. You can have town halls in your community centers, in your schools, and in your districts. It is really, really important that we hear from you and that we continue to hear from you as you see more things come out. Everything that happens in our committees will be made publicly available. You'll be able to review the interim recommendations, and hopefully that will allow you to have even more feedback. I heard a lot today about some really important issues. Very specifically, I heard a lot about special education, concentration of poverty. We heard about resources that our students need to be successful, whether that is academically in the classroom or other supports that they will need in order to thrive after they graduate. We heard a lot today. What I hope you all take away is that all of this has to be laid on a foundation of 2 things. We have to believe in public education. We have to believe what is possible in our school communities, and we've got to believe in children, but that means every single child. This formula has got to be about every single child. So I thank you so much tonight as a commissioner, but most importantly as a mama. I like knowing there's lots of other mamas and daddies and grandparents and community members who are here fighting for their kids. This really matters, and it's very personal, and I appreciate you taking the time. Please stay engaged and stay in touch. Thank you very much.